Jim Montgomery's coaching staff got a bit of a shakeup on Wednesday, but what does it all really mean?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Today is Thursday, June 13th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Got ahead of myself there thinking it was Friday, but sadly, it's only Thursday. The podcast is free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We're going to be talking about Jim Montgomery's coaching staff and some additions, promotions that were made there too on Wednesday. Before we get into that, quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. A familiar face will be back with the Boston Bruins this coming season as Bruins GM Don Sweeney announced yesterday that Jay Leach has been named an assistant coach for the Boston Bruins. In addition, Joe Sacco has been named associate coach, and John McLean will join the Bruins player development staff as a skating and skills coach. Now, Leach, of course, 44 years old. He most recently served as an assistant coach with the Seattle Kraken from 2021 up until this past season. Prior to that time, he spent 5 seasons with the Providence Bruins, acting as head coach from 2017 to 2021. And for quite some time, he was seen as kind of the heir apparent to Bruce Cassidy. However, his time in Boston ended before Bruce Cassidy was let go. He joined the Kraken, but now he is back. And Don Sweeney said the Bruins are excited to welcome Jay back to the organization. He was a very successful coach with the Providence Bruins, where he greatly impacted the player development system. He also brings valuable experience as an assistant coach from the Seattle Kraken. The Bruins believe Jay will integrate quickly and complement the current staff as he comes back to the Bruins to work primarily with the team defense core. Leach, of course, was instrumental in helping the Kraken reach the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2023. The team did fall off a bit this year. They had a coaching change with Dave Hackstall out, Dan Bilesma in. Leach coming back to the Boston Bruins as an assistant coach who will work primarily with the defense. Now, Joe Sacco, as I mentioned as well, promoted to associate coach. He's been an integral part of the coaching staff for quite some time due to his experience and the passion he brings to the group every day. And he is going to be an associate coach as opposed to an assistant coach. And there's a fine line between the two. Assistant coaches help with practices. They're usually in charge of one group of players, either the forwards or the defensemen. They usually help with one area of the game as well, whether it be the penalty kill or the power play. According to Hockey Skills Training, all associate coaches are assistant coaches, but not all assistants are associates. And the reason for the discrepancy is that not all NHL teams designate associate coaches. In terms of the hierarchy, associates are one step above a normal assistant coach and one step below a head coach. So Joe Sacco essentially is Jim Montgomery's right-hand man. He's not on the level of Montgomery, but he's above the assistants. It gives them a bit of power, and if the team designates an associate coach, it does make them the true second in command in the locker room. If a head coach is not around for any reason, the associate could step in and assume the role. If the head coach is fired mid-season and the organization is not interested in filling the vacancy with an outsider, the associate is generally the one who steps in as interim. So the main difference is rank and the respect and reliance from the head coach himself. It's an earned title for sure, given the fact that there's only a handful of teams that have associate coaches in the NHL. Two positions are similar, associate assistant, in the fact that they overlap quite a bit. And he's kind of now considered the lead assistant coach, one that's understood to step in and lead the team at a moment's notice if required to. Associate coaches, as does Sacco, usually have prior head coaching experience. And while there's not a huge difference between the two, there's some subtle differences, and you can now consider Joe Sacco to be Jim Montgomery's right-hand man. And again, Montgomery said he's been integral to the staff, and is pretty much the second in command. Now, I did mention John McLean shifting back to a skating and skill development position where he will remain integrated with the current staff, as well as broaden his scope to work with the entire player development system. John has been instrumental working with the medical staff on players returning from injury, and his experience as an assistant coach will provide great insights to young players throughout the organization to understand the work required to develop as a Bruin. So, when it's all said and done, here is kind of the lay of the land you have Jim Montgomery as the head coach, overseeing everything, working on the power play as well, along with Chris Kelly, who's still around. Sacco, who's been with the organization since 2014, is Montgomery's number 2. He'll continue to work on the penalty kill, which routinely draws high marks. McLean, focusing on more of a skills role last season, and served as kind of an eye in the sky. Still doing a bit of that, but also now helping in terms of player development. So that is kind of the lay of the land for the Bruins in terms of the coaching staff at the moment. You have Montgomery as the head coach, Sacco as an associate, Chris Kelly and Jay Leach as assistants. John McLean, player development. Bob Essensa remains around as the goaltending coach. What does this mean for Jim Montgomery? And what does it mean for the Bruins moving forward? Well, we'll talk about that here as the podcast continues. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Now, chances are there will not be a Game 5 in the NBA Finals back in Boston, but if there is, you want to check out Game Time because prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee, so Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. The last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, Celtics, Red Sox, or concerts, comedy, theater, events near you. Seat view, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Take all the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time, last-minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. Thanks so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're over on YouTube, do check out Locked On Sports Today. All the latest news, opinions, and analysis from across the Locked On Sports universe. free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. With all these coaching announcements yesterday, one thing we did not hear was an extension for Jim Montgomery. When he was hired in 2022, it was believed he was given a 3-year contract at around $2 million per season. So do the math. This will be his 3rd season behind the bench as coach of the Boston Bruins. Now, while last season's regular season campaign was exceptional, they flamed out in the playoffs in the first round. This year, pretty good regular season. They went even further in the second round, or into the second round this year. And therefore, it's reasonable to assume that at some point, Jim Montgomery will be given a contract extension. He's done pretty well coaching the Boston Bruins, all things considered. Last year, it wasn't the toughest job in the NHL, seeing as the Bruins were so loaded. But, there's still something to be said for pulling everybody together, learning from your mistakes, certainly, and then rectifying those as you move forward. And there were some improvements coaching-wise in the playoffs, although there were some decisions made that perhaps shouldn't have been, like changing the lineup in the Leaf series after Game 4, etc. Jim Montgomery, though, 164 regular season games, a record of 1-12, 32 and 20, a 744 save percentage, 9-10 in the playoffs. Interestingly, Bruce Cassidy had a record of 36 and 37 in the playoffs, but he did take the team to the Stanley Cup Final in 2019. I believe his, his second or third year on the job with the Boston Bruins. Let's see. It was his, third year on the job. So if we go by that trajectory, hey, under Bruce Cassidy, the Bruins lost in the first round to the Ottawa Senators, lost in the second round to the Tampa Bay Lightning, then advanced to the Stanley Cup Final, lost to the St. Louis Blues, and then lost second round, first round. So he got 6 seasons as head coach of the Boston Bruins. Jim Montgomery's only had 2 so far. If you go back prior, obviously, Claude Julien had quite a run, 10 seasons with the Boston Bruins, won a cup, won a Jack Adams. Bruce Cassidy won a Jack Adams. Jim Montgomery's won a Jack Adams. Neither have won cups. Prior to that, Mike Sullivan or Dave Lewis, 1 season. Mike Sullivan had 2 seasons, 164 games. Kind of a quick succession of coaches with Mike O'Connell coaching 9 games, Robbie Ftorek a couple seasons, Mike Keenan 1 season, Pat Burns 3 and a bit. So you see that dating back to the 90s, there wasn't a lot of job security with the Boston Bruins. The front office was a bit more volatile. There has been some stability there with Claude Julien getting 10 seasons almost. Bruce Cassidy, 6 seasons. Jim Montgomery, 2 so far, 3rd on the way. But he does need a contract extension. And with Joe Sacco stepping in as associate, like I mentioned earlier, that means he's basically the second in command. If Montgomery's absent for any reason, or if Montgomery were to be dismissed, say the Bruins go out and sign a bunch of high-profile free agents, or some at least, make a trade for involving Linus Ullmark, bring somebody in, and the expectations are higher heading into this season, and they come out flailing to open the year and off to a terrible record, there's some built-in insulation there for a coaching change. Sacco could just step right in, and Leach would be there as assistant, Chris Kelly as well, and they could carry on. I doubt that's going to happen. I would think it would at least be another, maybe missing the playoffs altogether. I think he'll get the full season, and then they'll evaluate give him a contract extension, or if they get off to a hot start. Remember, if you bring in a bunch of new players, it takes time for them to acclimate to their surroundings, to become tight as a unit. We saw that with Linus Ullmark when he first came to Boston. It took him, like that one full season to really feel at home, which is partly why he's reluctant to move on. He's been here for 3 seasons, 2 of which he's felt really comfortable in Boston. So all this to say, the structure is kind of rewarding Sacco for what he's accomplished as a coach with the Bruins, as an assistant coach for going on 10 years now. He obviously has a tight relationship with Jim Montgomery, well respected within the organization. He's been rewarded with a promotion here. But it's not to say that Montgomery is necessarily on the hot seat here. And there would have to be certain circumstances that arise for him to really be tossed aside here. Again, back at Bruce Cassidy. They went to the first round, lost in the second round in year 2, then went to this final in year 3, and then he was given 3 more seasons to work with. I could easily see a similar trajectory here with Jim Montgomery. Don't forget, general managers only get so many coaching hires. Once you played that card, and if things still don't improve and you still don't reach the pinnacle, it starts to fall on the head office here. So I think Sweeney is just kind of insulating the coaching staff, reinforcing it in the hopes that they will take an even bigger step forward here, moving out of this transition year and being able to add to the roster. Where they want to get is the Stanley Cup Final, which continues tonight. And are the Oilers taking inspiration from the Boston Bruins? Well, it's very possible, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Hey, Locked On Bruins fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM and managing your own franchise? Do you think you could run the Bruins better than Don Sweeney? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and lead it to glory. Hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or draft picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Bruins fan, there's no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in the game store, so make sure to check it out. Download the game, visit hockeygm.app, that's hockeygm.app, or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today. Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final goes tonight. There was a lot made yesterday about the Florida Panthers choosing to leave Florida a day later than the Oilers. They got caught in weather. They arrived less than 24 hours before puck drop here in Game 3. The Oilers find themselves down 0-2 after losing games 1 and 2 on the road by very close margins. If that sounds familiar, well, that's exactly what happened to the Boston Bruins in the 2011 Stanley Cup Final. They lost games 1 and 2 by 1 goal in each of those 2 games, came back, took games 3 and 4 at home, lost game 5, won game 6, and then ultimately took game 7 on the road in Vancouver. The Oilers facing a similar situation here as, again, down 0-2 after losing 2 games on the road, but they have Connor McDavid. They have Leon Draisaitl. They have Evan Bouchard. They have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They are not dead yet. And maybe Andrew Ference who played for the Oilers after his time with the Bruins, served as captain prior to Connor McDavid. Maybe McDee's reached out to talk to him about what it takes to pull off this kind of comeback. It's not impossible. It's unlikely. Vancouver fans obviously still resenting the fact that that was the case back in 2011. But it's very possible. And when you have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl playing on home ice, they get the power play going. It's certainly a real possibility that they can at least make this a series. And in a related note, which I found interesting, Evander Kane was saying the other day on a podcast, I believe, that the Boston Bruins sent him a basket to thank him for taking on Matt Cook back in the day. He said, what was the exact quote? He said he got a gift basket from the Boston Bruins later that year in the offseason because of what Cook had done to Mark Savard. And this was back in 2010. He knocked out Cook with a single punch during a scrap when he played for the Atlanta Thrashers. So there's another Bruins connection there. Keith Gretzky was with the Bruins when they pulled that off. He's now with the Oilers. They surely will be looking to replicate what the Bruins were able to pull off against the Vancouver Canucks as Game 3 turns to Edmonton here tonight. One more episode this week. Tomorrow, well, we'll save what we're going to talk about until then. I likely will be not recording on Monday as I'm going on a field trip with my grade 8 kid, one of the end of the year trips to Ripley's Aquarium in Toronto, which should be fun. So just subscribe to get all the latest. Each new episode will be automatically added to your feeds for you to download, listen, and enjoy. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for subscribing. And please do so if you have not already to catch all the action here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.